Hey there, welcome back to the Smells of Logic channel. I am Ramona, and today's Reddit stories are going to be what's the weirdest coincidence you've ever experienced? And before we get started, if you're liking this video or any of my videos, leave a like, please. Maybe leave a comment, share it with somebody, subscribe to the channel, go check out another video, put it on the background, listen to my irritating voice. It's all good. If you like to color, I have a whole host of coloring books that are released every Monday on Amazon. Just simple things. None of them are too complicated because that's just not who I am. But there you go. If you enjoy that or you know someone who does, go buy one, send it to them, buy it for yourself, whatever. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Ready? What's the weirdest coincidence you've ever experienced? First story is, when I was around 8 years old, I went on an adventure theme park based in the UK. While playing in a castle-themed wood chip play area, I climbed up to one of the towers by ladder and by the ladder into a small room. There were around 10 or 12 of these towers around the play area. When I entered my head into the small room, I was met with the sight of huge shit in the corner, covered in flies, and a pair of blue socks covered in shit also. Disgusting and weird, but yeah, these things happen. When I was 15, I moved to another city on the other side of the country and became best friends with a kid on my street. We're still best friends now, 16 years later. One day, we were talking, and the theme park came up, to which my friend told me he did a shit in one of the rooms in the castle play area when he was 8, and that he wiped his ass with the socks. I was astonished and asked him particularly which tower and which color were the socks. He said they were blue and described the same tower. So I saw my future best friend's shit 7 years before I moved to the castle country and met him. Pretty weird, right? And someone replied with, sounds like fate, but also disgusting. I hope your friend grew out of that. When I was 12 years old, an exchange student stayed at my house for a couple of weeks. We became friends. One day, we had a conversation about how we spent our birthdays. We found out we happened to be exactly the same age. We were born on the same day, month, and year. I had two people in two different classes who were born on the same day as me, but I remember correctly, it's not that rare. My daughter's roommate at college was born the exact same day and exact year as well. They both filled out their roommate questionnaires really late, and I don't think they ended up getting matched in any particular thought out of the way. Guy I was kind of with, but not really. His ex and I were born on the same day and year. I was living in America and went to holidays in Mexico. There I matched with a hot Mexican girl on Tinder in Cancun. We chatted but never met. I never unmatched her, neither did she. A year later, I have noticed her 2 miles away. She was a summer student in the same town in the UK where I relocated. I messaged her, but she didn't want to meet. When I was a kid, we used to drive past this old abandoned school on a hill on the way of a grocery store. I always thought it would be cool to make a house and live there. Years later, someone tore down the school and built a house there. I was an adult then and had my own kids and was living in a house with a leaky basement. So as I was driving my kids to the grocery store, I would pass the house and think, it must be nice and dry living up on that hill. I bet he doesn't have a leaky basement. Fast forward a few more years and I am divorced and remarried. We are looking to buy a house. A guy my wife works with is selling his house. Turns out that he has the very same house on the hill. I live there now and am writing this comment from my nice dry house on the hill. Years before cell phones and e-tickets, I was supposed to meet a friend at the stadium for an NFL game. He gave me his row and seat number, but not the level or section number. Our tickets weren't near each other. We were just going to meet up there and find empty seats together somewhere, anywhere. I got to the game and realized the error, wandering around for a bit. Went to the closest section just to look at the action on the field, really quick before I just found my section and set to watch the game alone, and there he was. What are the odds? I lost my USB containing all my schoolwork when I was in college. When you lose something like that, you don't expect to get it back. In desperation, I prayed to God and asked him to bring it back to me if he was indeed really listening. I wasn't a very religious person. A fellow student returned it a few days later. I apparently left it in a taxi. He found it, looked through the files, and found the name of the student organization he was applying for, which I was also a part of, and asked if anyone had lost their USB. Coincidence? I used to spend my summers working in the office of a church camp in northern Iowa. I became friends with some of the people who spent their vacation there, especially this one little girl who would stay for 2 weeks every summer. I was sort of a big sister for the 2 weeks her family was there. Then came a summer I had my internship in New York City, and I didn't go to camp. I was sort of bummed that I couldn't see this girl. One weekend, a bunch of us decided to go to Washington, D.C., and I wore my staff shirt from the camp. It had very distinctive stripes across the shoulders. We are in the Smithsonian, and I feel someone touch my arm. I turn around, and it is the little girl who was my friend. She and her parents had gone from Iowa. She and her parents had gone from Iowa to D.C. for part of their vacation. They'd missed me at camp that year. They didn't quite believe her when she said that she saw me until they spotted the stripes from across the room. My current husband shares a birthday with my first husband. My Uncle Raymond, he was only married twice, both to women named Mabel. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I just want to share that. When I was in the early stages of dating my spouse, I brought her to my hometown to meet my parents. While looking at an old family photo album, she pointed to a picture and said, "How do you know this man?" I answered, "That's my uncle." She said, "No, he's my uncle." Turns out my mother's sister married my mother's brother. On my internship program, which recruited people from all across the country, I hung out with this one guy from Overland Park, Kansas, who went to the University of Kansas. We'll call him Danny Tupper. Slightly unusual last name, definitely identifiable. So a couple of years later, I moved to NYC, and the residence hall I live in, we're having a party on the roof. There's a new girl, and she's from Kansas. "Oh, where in Kansas?" I ask. "Overland Park." Now, as a joke, I say to her, "Oh, so you know Danny Tupper." Because, if I'm going to say I'm from Iowa, people ask me if I know some random person also from Iowa. And Overland Park is a suburb of KC, so it's not a tiny town. It's so ridiculous to think that she really knows this random person that I know. She looks at me kind of funny and says, "My mom and his mom play bridge." Okay. Then I'm in a friend's wedding in Missouri. We went to college together at a small college in Missouri. And I'm chatting with the groomsman I'm paired up with. I knew he was from the same fraternity as the groom, which is the same frat Danny was in. He and the groom met during a summer frat workshop in the University of Missouri. He mentions he went to school at the University of Kansas. He's several years younger than me, so maybe he isn't in school at the time, but I ask anyway, "Oh, do you know Danny Tupper?" "Yep, his little brother was in my pledge class. He's a big mentor for me." Okay. Then I'm chatting with my best friend from college. She tells me she went on a job interview at a company in our industry in Overland Park. I don't think much of it. It's several years and people move around, but I remind myself to make the "do you know Danny Tupper" joke since she's done with her story. She describes meeting people, then going into the office of a senior executive who looks at her resume and says, "Oh, you went to a smaller Missouri college. Do you know Toots NYC?" Then he says to me, "Do you know Danny Tupper?" He had a really great girlfriend, or I might have picked up stakes and moved to Overland Park to try to marry him. I was going to get a t-shirt and wear it everywhere. When I was 8, my best friend and his family came over to bring me a Christmas present. Guess what it was? My friend said. Had absolutely no idea, so I just said the weirdest, most random thing I could think of. An inflatable dinosaur. I guessed, and it was. It was gigantic. I was born and grew up in Connecticut until I was 5. I had a few close friends there, but after I moved, I lost touch and never spoke to them again. When I was moving out of my mother's house to go to college, I was going through old pictures. I found a picture of me at the Connecticut Town Carnival, riding the merry-go-round. There in the background, also on the merry-go-round, was my very best childhood friend. I didn't even know it at the time that she was there. This is the only pic I have of her. I was a student in the 70s, and I hitchhiked from Durham to Dundee with a friend to see a concert. It only took us 2 main lifts, a delivery lorry followed by a nice lady in a car. We didn't have anywhere to stay and ended up allowed to sleep in the waiting room of a local hospital. The next morning we were hitching outside the hospital and just got picked up by the same woman. She dropped us off in the place that she had picked us up, and then the same lorry driver picked us up from there and brought us back the rest of the way. I was around 16 and traveling with a few schoolmates for a sports competition in another city. Boys were sharing one hotel room, girls another. We were lying around mid-afternoon with the TV on, and an ad for Fruit Loops came on. They looked so appetizing at that moment, and it dawns on me that I have the freedom of this stage of my life, on this trip, to just go and get some. I put my coat on, rally a friend to come with me down the elevator and across the street to the variety store. As I go to exit the hotel room door, there is a knock. I open it up to one of the girls from next door, standing at the door to ask us what's up. In her hands is an open box of Fruit Loops that she's snacking on. It was not any kind of theme or discussion point prior to that moment. I used to work at a movie theater. One day, a group of people from an organization that helps mentally handicapped people experience a sense of normalcy in their life come through. They each had their own cash and came to concessions for candy and popcorn. One girl in my line had a bunch of candy but was like $1.25 short. When I told her this, she had this look of defeat and was about to start crying, when I told her that was fine and I'd cover it myself. She happily took our candy and went to watch her movie. The next day, I got a keep the change tip from a random customer of $1.25. That was the only tip I had ever gotten at that job. Weirdest coincidence I experienced was some dude texting me on Discord who sounded exactly like my ex and ended up actually being him in disguise. It's not really a coincidence. It's stalking. The summer before grade 5, my family moved 2 Providences west. I was sad to leave my friends, but I was especially excited to get away from my bully, a loser named Jeff. On my first day at the new school, the teacher introduced 2 new students in the class, me and my bully Jeff, from 2 provinces away. We had both moved from the same small town, Saskatchewan, to the same small town, British Columbia. What are the chances? I was in high school and had a minor car accident on the way. We're getting checked at the hospital, and the doctor advises me to go home. I walk in the stairs to our house, and odd things are strewn all over the floor. I suddenly hear voices downstairs. I go to my mom's closet where all the guns are. I grab the rifle. Our house had a set of stairs going down, a landing, then 3 small stairs going into the hallway. On the landing was a phone and a place to sit. One guy is in one brother's room trying on clothes. The other guy is in the other brother's room. They don't realize I'm on the landing, listening, trying to decide what to do. The phone rings. I aim the gun towards my brother's bedroom doors. They both step out into the hall. I never took my eyes off of them and told the caller I was being robbed. Spit out my address and asked them to call the police. I hung up the phone. Both men had on ski masks. One of them had the bluest, whitest eyes I had ever seen. We all stared at each other for a few seconds. Then they bolted out the back door of the house where they had broken in. The police were there in minutes. They did not catch them. Later, I realized they had stolen all the magazines to the guns and that my rifle was not loaded. My future sister-in-law was the caller. Fast forward 6 months later. My friend was driving, and I was in another minor car accident. I get home in the middle of the morning, again. This time, they've made themselves food and left the mess all over the kitchen. I go back to my mom's room and find the hidden gun with magazines loaded. I creep down the stairs. These guys are back in my brother's bedrooms. I stop again at the landing. They hear me. I say this time I'm loaded, pointing the gun at them. They were slowly backing up, and the phone rang. Once again I told the caller I'm being robbed, my address, and to call the police, and I hang up. Again they ran out of the back door to their van, dropping stereo speakers along the way. It was my future sister-in-law on the phone the second time, too. The same police officers came. They got an alarm system. Or we got an alarm system. They were never caught. We did find a couple of items at local pawn shops. Fast forward 15 years. I'm taking my vacuum cleaner to get repaired. I walk into the vacuum shop. There are several people waiting. The guy working behind the counter looks up at me. It's the same guy, the same cold blue eyes. He stopped in his tracks. Everyone in the shop knew something was wrong. He knew that I knew who he was and what he had done. I picked up my vacuum cleaner and walked out. I called my mom and told her. Fast forward 20 years, but then it stops, so I don't know quite what happened. Sorry. This happened to my brother when we were a lot younger. First of all, we were a poor family from Eastern Europe, so we shared a PC. Both me and my brother were really into gaming, and that PC was the only option to play video games. One time, my parents planned a one-day trip in the forest in the mountains. My brother, who was like 12 or 13, refused to come, and to play video games, of course. When we got back, he kind of looked frightened, but didn't say a word. He was just very happy to see us somehow, which was weird. Later that evening, he told me that he sat playing games, randomly looked at the light in the room, which was on, and said if demons exist, the light should go off. He said that in the instant the light went off. Pretty terrifying for a child in a Christian family. But now I only think, what an effing coincidence. Ha ha ha. Stopped at a four-way stop in town once. It was new, used to be only two-way. Intersection was empty, just me. I have a feeling that I should stay there for a bit, which is unusual because I'm a pretty impatient driver. It's so strong that I look around and say out loud, What the F am I sitting here for? Just then, 2 blocks up the street, a blue truck turns out and starts heading my way. I say, Is this it? Then I watch as it blows the stop sign at 30 miles per hour, no brakes, nothing. They didn't know about the new signs. I followed them a few blocks to the next light and explained to them. Weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. I grew up in UAE as an expat and had a really close friend in school. Our parents were friends as well, and they knew each other from when we all left our country of origin because of war. After graduating high school and moving to the U.S., we kept in touch, and about 25 years later, a whole bunch of people were invited to my friend's wedding in Turkey. About 25 people all congregated in this tiny town in Turkey at a boutique hotel for 3 days. One day, while a bunch of us were having breakfast, I sat down next to my friend's college buddy from the UK, and he asked where I lived. I mentioned Portland. He asked me if I knew anyone from Liberia. From Libya. I nonchalantly responded that I worked for a guy previously who was Libyan. Turns out it was his very close cousin. He calls him up while we're having breakfast, and sure enough, it was my friend's college roommate's cousin. Craziest coincidence of my life. I grew up in a small town in California, then moved to Missouri as an adult. Before moving, I spent my early 20s working at a local video store in that small town. 14 years later, I was in a hospital in Missouri having surgery to break up a kidney stone. The overnight patient care person looked familiar to me. Every time she comes in, I keep thinking I know her, but I can't figure out why. She mentions that she is from California, and I say I am too. Turns out we're from the same small town, and she was a regular customer of mine. She said she'd been trying to figure out why she recognized me, too. When I was 16, I went to a friend's birthday party. There I met a guy and we got to chatting. We both found out we were born on the same day, same year, at the exact same hospital. Turns out our moms knew each other when we were born and were friends. Me and the guy dated for a bit, broke up, but we're still friends to this day. A cousin of mine was born in a hospital basement during a tornado. They named him after our grandfather because it was his birthday. Later found out that a local man with the exact same name died during the tornado. Simple and sweet. Mom got me a Beanie Baby dog plush and asked me what its name was. I named it Scooter. Mom was like, they come their names on the tag. What was the name on the tag? Scooter. Blew my 3-year-old mind. Not mine, but my friend's story. Her cousin moved to Japan and noticed that someone in their building had the same last name, looking at the apartment buzzers or mailboxes. It's a relatively unusual Moroccan Jewish last name, and obviously they're in Tokyo, so that's pretty weird to begin with, to see a non-Japanese name, let alone the exact same name. So they knock on the door and we're like, Hi, this is weird, but I'm your neighbor and we have the same last name. Are we possibly related? Turns out that the neighbor was a branch of their family that had gotten lost. Nobody knew what had happened to them. It's a massive family with literally hundreds of cousins in the same generation, and this particular bit of the family had just gotten lost in the mix. The parents would have known these people's parents, so everyone got back in touch, and they got reconnected with the whole rest of the family. I thought it was crazy. What are the odds? Well, we're going to leave this video right there. Some interesting coincidences. Some nice uplifting little stories there. Leave yours down in the comments if you don't mind, if you'd like to. If not, that's okay. Go check out another video. And thank you for taking the time to listen and watch this. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.